What is going on, everybody? We just watched Dune. We're back now, and we decided to do the full-length spoiler review right now. We have a lot to talk about, so let's get into it.
Yeah, so just before we start, we kind of had a unique perspective on this review. I made sure that I read the book and you went in as a pure cinema goer, no knowledge of the book
Casual
beforehand. Yeah.
moviegoer. So I watched all the promo material, and I watched all the interviews, and I watched all of that, but I never read the book. And you read the book. You basically studied, quote unquote, the lore, and you had an idea. So you're going to be probably answering more of the questions than I can.
But I'll be interested to see what you took away from this movie as well, because I know both of us loved it. Anyways, now I as far as our impressions of this movie go, it was just absolutely phenomenal on so many levels. The music, the set pieces, the cast, right? Everything was awesome.
This is our Star Wars moment, right? Because every generation kind of has a cinematic event, and I thought that ours was going to be Marvel, and it is, but we have more than one apparently. So we got Marvel, and now we got the Dune franchise. Really, it could be one of those huge things in the future, and I totally see a future for it the way it was made. Not only that, they left so much to be desired in the future movies that a lot of the times there's not much to be desired after something ends. But in this case, there's just so much more to explore.
Honestly, I hope that Denis Villeneuve gets the green light for part two. It's basically all but confirmed by Warner Brothers. So, Warner Brothers, go do your thing. Make this into a trilogy as Denis wants to do. And just to give you guys a little bit of backstory, right? The first book, Dune, in the 6-part series, was split into 2 parts, right? Dune Part 1 and Dune Part 2, which is coming probably in the next 2 or 3 years. Then after that, the second book in the Dune series is going to be the third part in this Dune trilogy called Dune Messiah. So, and that's really where things get heavy and it kind of closes the saga, so to speak.
So, big time spoilers ahead. We warned you. If you don't want spoilers, go to the short that we did where we basically just told you how much we loved the movie. But from now on, is spoilers. So, this movie was super confusing. We got our boy, Paul Atreides. That's the guy who's the main character. We've got his father. We've got the person who trained him, Duncan. We've got Gurney, who is also someone who trains him and is basically security. And we have a lot of Lady Jessica, for example, and very confusing in that sense because there's a lot of flashbacks. There's a lot of flashbacks going on. There's a lot of moments that you're like out of place almost, and then you realize that it was all culminating to a point where Zendaya's character Cheney meets with Paul.
There were definitely a lot of flash forwards, and I love how disorienting the director made them appear. I mean, we kind of got a peek into Paul's mind as he experienced these glimpses into potential futures. Honestly, it was giving me some Doctor Strange vibes.
Yeah. One question that I have for you is because obviously, let's just talk about the plot really quickly. We have the Atreides house, which is probably the strongest house or the biggest threat of a house to the Emperor, and we have this whole empire.
The Imperium.
Atreides is sent, yeah, the Imperium, I'm sorry. The Atreides house is sent to a planet called Arrakis, called Dune. Yeah, basically, Arrakis called Dune, and they were there to harvest spice. It was a whole plan made by the Emperor to dethrone the house of Atreides, really, and destroy it.
Yep. So there's this scene in the book that they cut from this movie for obvious reasons because it would give away the entirety of the Baron's genius plan. But what ends up happening is the Baron basically sits around a globe of Arrakis with all his little henchies, and he's like, "So here's what we're gonna do, right? We're gonna put this guy named Doctor Yui in the Atreides household. Me and the Emperor made a deal because everybody knows that I absolutely hate Duke Leto, right? So what we're gonna do is the Emperor is gonna give me going to give Duke Leto my planet as a quote unquote gift. But what this will do is give me the kind of authority to come back and take it back. And he's going to give me his Sardaukar troops as support. So that's pretty much what happened. The Emperor really hates Leto's power and he's jealous of it. That's why he wants to use the rivalry between the Harkonnens and the Atreides to put himself back in a position of security.
I think we need to just briefly talk about how this whole thing is structured. Obviously, they had a whole machine war where it was basically the inverse of the Matrix. The machines
Exactly.
lost and they stopped using machines, which is why they've kind of. I thought it was super interesting how society kind of reverted back into the future. The year was obviously 10,000 something. So society kind of went from their like modern of the people back to a feudal system in the future in this movie. So the House of Atreides is one house. They got House of Harkonnen. They got the Emperor's house, and they've got House Carino, and they've got many more houses apparently that we don't know, but are alluded to because Leto has power over all of
So
them.
the Harkonnens definitely, it's stated that they've acquired more wealth than the Emperor. But one key thing to note here is that wealth does not equate to power. Power is, it can take many forms, right? As Leda was saying, desert power, air power, those kinds of things. And that's why Leda wanted to concentrate on getting the Fremen on his side.
Right. And I think what's going to happen at the end of the day is that, or the end of the trilogy, is that Paul is going to become that. He's going to take the Fremen. He's going to take the Fremen as he's going to become their leader, and then he's going to make a play for the Emperor.
No spoilers here, but I got to say you're onto something.
Yeah, I don't know.
Should I spoil?
I mean, listen, we're gonna read. I'm gonna read the book, and then we'll find out. I feel like I'm on the right track because that's the obvious way for them to go from here. But either way, I think character-wise, right? I think this. First of all, this cast was star-studded. Like everywhere you look, you have somebody. I also kind of thought it was funny, and you mentioned this earlier to me as well, that how they kind of switched the Thanos and Drax dynamic with Gurney and what was his name? I can't.
Glossu Raban.
Yeah, Gloss. I can never. I'm not gonna be able to remember that name. I'm just gonna say
Just call
that.
him Beast if you want. That's his
Yeah.
nickname.
So they kind of switched that dynamic because Gurney's family was killed by him.
Basically, the backstory behind that scene was going to be in the movie, but then Denis had this dream where he actually omitted it, and he thought it was more elegant, to just have Gurney say, "I've met Harkonnens before. They're brutal, right?" As opposed to being like, "Hey, Dave Bautista's character killed my sister." I gotta say, I think less is more in this case. I think he did a pretty interesting thing. You can really feel the emotion when he says that.
Yeah. And on top of that, I thought the whole fighting scenes were very well done. The cinematography, the certain shots were so well done.
Shout out to Greg
There was
Fraser, by the way. Absolute amazing job with cinematography.
the only problem that I can find with it while we're listing stuff is the screaming. Basically there was a lot of screaming during certain parts, and I think my exact words in the theater were, "What in the Zack Snyder Wonder Woman is this?" Because they didn't stop. I thought it was unnecessary for two scenes, but the rest of it was kind of necessary, especially that one scene where they after Atreides has been completely destroyed on Dune, they kind of just pan through it.
Yeah, like Liet Kynes is gazing at the ruins of Arrakeen, right? That scene.
Hmm. That's definitely necessary. But let's get back on track. What is the Emperor's official plan, and how does the Baron? So the Baron basically is his executioner in this state. But what is it about the Emperor? Like, why is it that the Emperor wants this? Like, to be completely clear.
He wants security for his throne, and he's capitalizing on an ancient rivalry between House Harkonnen and House Atreides to put
Right.
himself
But
back in a
why
position of
would
power.
why would Atreides pick that up though? Why would Atreides take that mission? Because I felt like, Oscar Isaac's character, Duke, he knew that this was a death sentence, but he didn't realize how far they would go to do this death
Exactly,
sentence.
and that's part of what that's part of why they stress bullfighting as a metaphor, right? When you bullfight, right, you're waving that red flag to attract the bull. And Duke Leto thought that he was the bullfighter. He didn't think that he was the bull about to be executed, right, running towards the red flag and then eventually perishing, right?
Right. And it was quite tragic as well in certain places, like I, especially when I think back to the characters. I think for me, Duke Leto, Atreides, and Duncan were my two favorite characters. And guess what? They killed them both off.
Well, no spoilers up ahead, but for those of you who are Duncan Idaho fans out there, there's good news coming up in future installments. Let's just say that.
Yeah. But here's the thing. Much like Marvel, if you've followed us before, you know that I'm a huge Marvel fan. Much like Marvel, the whole time Marvel, right? I have obviously Iron Man as my favorite character. Iron Man is my favorite character of all time for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, when he showed up in Homecoming and Spider-Man was the new kid on the block, although Tony Stark was still my favorite character, I could understand that Peter Parker at some point was going to be my favorite character. To talk about Dune with this, I saw Duncan and I saw Duke, and I said, all right, these are my favorite characters for this movie, but I can see how Paul Atreides is going to be my favorite character in the future.
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, it's like a passing of the torch moment, right? And I do think you'll get to see some of Duke Leto's traits reflected in Paul in part two as he achieves a greater level of maturity. I mean, this movie was about him going from a boy to a man and setting the stage for all the crazy shit that's going to go down in part two.
All right, let's talk more about this crazy shit. You got to tell me what is up with this the one business, cuz I thought we were done with that after Anakin. But
Okay,
the
okay.
one business I need to know because I know he's of two different bloodlines, right? He's inheriting from his mother and he's inheriting from his father, and his mother is obviously part of the whole secret female CIA thing. But get into that for a second.
So there's a shadowy order called the Bene Gesserit. They're all female and they masquerade as a religious organization. But the reality is they have far more sinister plans that they've been sowing over the years, right? Their main plan is to create, in part through genetic breeding, selective breeding, I should say, uh, a being called the Kwisatz Haderach. And that being is able to basically have the memories of both their male and female ancestors and also have prescience, able to see into the future. But the Bene Gesserit want the KH in their control. They want to be able to steer him so that he can help them accomplish their goals, right? Now Paul was basically an accidental Kwisatz Haderach because Lady Jessica wasn't supposed to have a son. She disobeyed the Bene Gesserit by having a son because they were trying to get her to have a daughter.
Right, because there was that scene. There was that scene when she said, Because of your arrogance, you had a son rather than a daughter." Because there was a lot of power in that child, regardless of whether if it was a girl that would have had more
Yeah,
power as the
so
Bene
the
Gesserit.
plan was, and this is getting into huge spoiler territory, so I'm just gonna leave it at this, right? The Kwisatz Haderach would be formed when the Atreides and the Harkonnen bloodlines merged, and hopefully Jessica's daughter would mate with the Baron's nephew, Fade, to produce the Kwisatz Haderach. That was the original plan. Now, obviously, that didn't happen, and Paul is the Kwisatz Haderach. So you guys out there, connect the dots. I mean, do the two
Do the
plus
two
two.
plus two.
There's
Do the two
some
plus two here.
schemes that have been going on.
There's some big reveal that's about to happen that I feel like because I've listened to you enough and I kind of see the hints. I also like have the benefit of looking at you while you're freaking winking. So now I know exactly
Stay tuned for
what you're
part
talking
two,
about.
right?
This is gonna be. I want to point this out. This is gonna be a Luke, I am your father scene, basically, or it's not gonna be father in this case, but
You're giving too much away. You're
that
giving too
it
much
actually
away,
might,
man.
it actually is
All
father.
right, all right. Just
Yeah,
shut
yeah,
up
yeah. All
now.
right,
Back to the
stop right
Bene
there.
Gesserit, right?
But the one, back to the one. I don't, not the Bene
You know,
Gesserit, back to the
the
one.
Bene Gesserit have created the
How,
one.
what is the one's power? How
The thing
powerful
is,
will the one be?
the Kwisatz Haderach is real. The Lisan al Gaib that the people on Arrakis were praising, that was actually a myth created by the Bene Gesserit's superstition division called the Missionaria Protectiva. And their aim was whenever a Bene Gesserit came in the future and asked for help, they would be able to rely on the ancient legend planted by the BG and be like, yeah, remember that legend about the Lisan al Gaib? Yeah, by the way, I'm the mother in that legend, right? So please give me the special treatment and care I deserve. And that's exactly what happened, right? Jessica is using this legend to protect herself and her son.
So the Lisan Al Gaib, right? So that's the savior.
That's the savior,
What
yeah.
you're saying is Paul Atreides is not going to be the savior.
No, it's a subversion of the savior trope.
Oh, so he's going to be so. From what you know about the books, he's going to be not as nice of a leader as we're thinking.
Well, I mean, based on the movie, you already know he's gonna commit a holy war in his name, right?
Yeah. So it's not going to be the savior. Rather, it's going to be he's going to
It's a
be more
tragedy,
of
bro.
it's a tragedy. Interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So how powerful is
It's
the
a
one going to be? What is the power? Back to what I was saying there. What is the power of
Oh,
this
the
dude?
Kwisatz Haderach has, if that's what you mean by the one, he has extreme power. Like this dude's able to see through the future, and I mean, as you saw, right? He was overwhelmed by what he saw. You know, with
Right.
great power comes great responsibility, and it certainly took him a while before he was able to really step up to that mantle and kill Jamis. Right? That was really
Yeah.
the
And
tipping
after
point
he
as
had
far as the
killed
maturity went.
the man, it was there was like he definitely because Timothy Chalamet is such a great actor as well. There was like a look in his eye that he had where it was just like that he had changed into a different person. And
It was the same look he gave the Reverend Mother, like that really angry, steely look, right?
yeah, so he's gonna basically, as we're saying, is as you're saying, he's gonna have like a holy war and use the Fremen to do so. They also mentioned how there are millions of Fremen, so as opposed to the very small number that the Harkonnens reported.
The Harkonnens didn't have as accurate of an estimate, in part due to as just my little theory here, right? I don't think Piter de Vries was as good of a mentat as Thufir Hawat. And let's talk about the mentats a little bit, right? The reason why mentats exist is going back to that AI versus human conflict you previously touched on. That conflict was called the Butlerian Jihad, and obviously humans won, so they banned all the computers. That's why, as you see, 10,000 years later, we've gone back to a sort of feudal, retro futuristic sort of society, right? No computers,
Right.
but they still wanted to have some element of computation in their society. That's why they ended up training humans to be computers, and those humans are called mentats, right? So
The ones that roll their eyes back.
exactly, you got it, right? Now, Denis Villeneuve has said that mentats weren't as explored in this part, but in the next part, we'll go into the mentat world a lot more and we'll get to see the inner workings. Now, as a book reader, what that means is you'll get to find out what happened to Hawat and maybe go into a little bit more backstory as far as the Butlerian Jihad goes.
That'd be interesting. Also, we not to mention your whole point about the books. Sorry, the whole point about the computers. They do have audiobooks still, and that's where Paul Ray learns his stuff.
They're films, kind of like
Yeah,
Richard Attenborough
basically,
analogs, right?
right. So we have a little bit more to talk about here. So what was up with the bagpipe guy? That's my next question to you.
Okay, so basically, if we're going by the Brian Herbert vein of lore, the Atreides are descended from Scots. Now that was like a nice little reference to that element of their
I see.
backstory. But what I really liked about that scene was how it transitioned from like in universe diegetic sound to like out of universe soundtrack sound. I really thought that was a genius transition by Hans Zimmer. I mean,
Yeah, Hans
I'm not
Zimmer's very,
surprised.
very, very, very amazing. He's
Genius
like one of the
composer.
most genius
And if you guys
composers.
like the music, by the way, go check out the sketchbook because that was absolutely fire. Listen to that while I was reading the book, and it was just like such a crazy experience. Check that out, guys.
Speaking of, I gotta get to reading that book. I basically refrained from reading anything. One, because how I felt after Harry Potter, because I read the books and then I watched the movies, and I was like,
Hey, hey, hey.
this, yeah, yeah, I thought that wasn't the same. And then we're not even gonna talk about the piece of fucking garbage that was Percy Jackson, as opposed to the books. The books were like 10 out of 10, and then the movies were like, how many negative points can I give? I need a pack of Tylenols after that movie.
I mean, I really liked the fact that Harry Potter did justice to the books, in my opinion, at least. But the thing about this movie was that Denis Villeneuve has loved this book since age 14, and it's been a lifelong dream of his to adapt this to the cinema. So obviously, there's a little bit more commitment to the source material than things like Percy Jackson. I'll tell you one thing: I don't think the Percy Jackson director wanted to direct that movie since he was 14, right?
Yeah. So as a book reader, as someone who has read the books, I can't speak on this right now. So I take it to you. How accurate or how good in comparison to the book was this movie?
I would say this movie is about 95% as good as the book, if only because the book was longer, and the book actually told a complete
Mm,
story. which allowed it to spend more time doing things like world building and getting into the characters' thoughts. And unfortunately, the medium of a movie, while it's a lot more visually expressive, it isn't as psychologically expressive as text.
But did you see like obviously did you see Denis like his commitment to creating every scene how you saw it in your head? Were there any scenes where you were kind of like this is exactly how I imagined it?
For like the one or two scenes where it didn't match up with like the general picture in my head, I had to say like, Denis definitely did it better than I could have ever imagined it. But there were some scenes like
Wow.
the
Okay.
the council meeting scene, and also the scene where Duke Leto is walking with Paul in the cemetery. Like that was pretty much exactly how it was in my head, and it was just scary to see. I think this was Denis' intention. He said, "I want the readers of the book to feel like I put a camera inside their heads."
All right, so we basically got two more things. We've got the voice, which I want to talk about. What is the voice? How is it obtained? Where did it really come from? And how come only, certain people can use the voice? How come someone like Duke wasn't able to learn the voice despite being attached to Jessica in a way. He wasn't married obviously, but he knew her for a very long time.
So the voice is a Bene Gesserit power that basically allows you to control somebody else's subconscious, right? And in many ways, Star Wars was inspired by Dune, so you can see where the idea of a Jedi mind trick came from, right? This is the original Jedi mind trick right
I
here.
thought it was the other way
I
around,
mean, Dune's from
actually.
the.
That's a little
It's
factoid.
really funny, right? You see a book from the night. What you're seeing on screen, that's a 1960s book, right? This stuff is literally a story from the 60s. Talk about ahead of your time, right? Frank Herbert was
Yeah,
was thinking years
100%.
ahead with this book. But anyways, going back to what I was saying, the voice is a Bene Gesserit power, and Duke Leto isn't as keen on the idea of Jessica being this kind of working in the shadows Bene Gesserit, right? He loves her as a human. He doesn't love her as a Bene Gesserit. And sometimes he even calls her
Mm.
condescendingly a Bene Gesserit witch in the books.
Okay, and we didn't really get to see Oscar Isaac do that, but again, like, do you think this whole movie could have been? I know I'm kind of getting into the territory of how we treated What If and just found little nitpicky shit and just like went after it. But would this movie have been completely avoided if Duke had just married Lady Jessica? Because the Bene Gesserit obviously had some power over the Baron, saying that you can't kill Jessica and Paul. So if he had married, what?
I mean, Leto wasn't walking into the safest of places. Let's just put it that way. So I think that conversation that he had with Jessica was kind of like a, hey, if I'm not around, I want you to know this. And there's an entire subplot in the book where basically uh, the Atreides family discover that there is a traitor implanted in their house, and they're trying to figure out who it is. But the Harkonnens want them to think that it's Lady Jessica, right? Howard even believes the Harkonnen ruse that it's Jessica, and he gets really salty. He's like, "Hey, yo, you're really trying to betray our house like this?" And Jessica's like, "I would never do this." Now the thing is, Duke Leto knows it's not Jessica. He's like, my Jessica would never betray me, but I'm gonna act as though she is the traitor so as to not let the Harkonnens know that I'm actually on to their plan. Yeah, it's only revealed to Lady Jessica that Duke Leto was acting coldly towards her because of that. And it's like after his death. It was super tragic, right?
So there's a lot more in the book than this.
I
They
know.
really didn't go into all of that. Yeah. So interesting the way they got him though, and how he did take out. I do wish he had gotten the Baron,
Me
and
too.
I'll tell you why. Because I think as somebody who I don't know how far the Baron goes or how evil he will be or will he be the main villain. It does look like it definitely
Oh, he's
so
evil,
far.
bro. He's evil
No,
as
no,
hell.
no. Facts. He's evil, but like I'm saying, no shit. But like I'm thinking, if he'd gotten the Baron, then the only villain left necessarily would have been the Emperor. And that's who I really want to see. I don't care about the Baron. Like, I would have been very happy with Duke taking out Baron and then Paul being like, now I'm going for the big boy. Now I'm going for the Emperor who did this to my father.
The thing is, the Emperor isn't as foreboding as you might think. He doesn't actually hate the Duke as much as the Baron. And honestly, he said that like, hey, like there's this part in the book where the emperor's daughter is reflecting on what the emperor thought of Leto, and she was like, "Hey, I mean, Dad thought that in other circumstances he and Leto might have been friends, and he felt bad for having to do this to Leto."
So do you think will there ever be like, first of all, let's just go into this. The Emperor, does he know about this whole the one business? Does he know about this whole like does he know about this myth? And if so, like would he have respected that if, Duke had said, "Here's my son to marry one of your daughters and kind of become the emperor."
So the emperor, as far as I know, is not aware of the Kwisatz Haderach legend, right? He's not intertwined with the Bene Gesserit. But the thing is, the Bene Gesserit have implanted their members in all of these houses. So it's kind of like the other way around, right? The Bene Gesserit know what's going on with the emperor. The emperor has no idea what's going on behind the scenes.
So why wouldn't the emperor just let, the Duke son be his heir?
What do you mean?
Is he gonna live forever? Because he knows he's gonna die of old age at some point, right?
Just adopt Paul?
No, not adopt, but like marry into the family.
That's Paul's plan.
Yeah, but that's not gonna happen, is it? Because he has Zendaya right now. He's got Cheney.
I'm not going to say, bro. You're going to have to see to
Ah,
find out.
interesting, interesting. Yeah, that was the last thing I was gonna ask you, just because I know in all the future visions it was like Zendaya's character was by. And by the way, I'm gonna keep saying Zendaya, guys, because any movie that she's at this point she's like in so many movies that it's kind of like The Rock, where it's just like I just call The Rock in all the movies. I just call Batista in all his movies. You know what? So
Yeah, I mean,
same thing
I'm
with
I'm I'm
Zendaya.
gonna respect Frank Herbert by calling her Chani, but I mean Zendaya did do an amazing job at really becoming that role. So I can definitely see where you're coming from.
Yeah, there's a lot of unanswered questions there, but again, they left a lot for part two. They left a ton for part two, and you know more than me right now because I haven't read the books. Obviously, I will at some point, but walk us through what's going to happen in part two, kind of like what you think is going to happen, because obviously they're not exactly doing what the books did. They have some variation.
It's like 99% the same story as the book. They have small adjustments made mostly for concision, but at the movie's soul, it's the same as the book.
All right, so what's in part two then?
All right, so let's talk about part two. All right, so first of all, you're gonna get to see the fates of many of your favorite characters. Where they ended up, right? So number one is Gurney. Did he end up dying during the attack on Arakeen, or is he still alive? What's gonna happen to him? Number two is,
I doubt he's dead, by the way.
I mean, the good old rule, right? If you don't see the character's body, he's not dead. All right,
Exactly, that's what I'm
I'm just gonna
saying.
leave it at that. Number two is Thufir Hawat. What happened to him? Because he kind of just disappeared, and really we didn't really get to see what happened to him, right? And remember that mouse that kept showing up?
Right.
That mouse is called Muad'Dib, and that's the name that Paul will adopt. So you'll get to see how Paul goes from being pretty much a noob as far as feminine culture goes to really being a legitimate member of the Fremen. He's going to ride sandworms, do a bunch of cool stuff. You're going to get to see more of the Baron and his family. There is a nephew by the name of Faye that I mentioned before. He wasn't in this movie. He was written out due to concision, but chronologically, he is in part one in the book. Fade's a pretty famous gladiator fighter, right? So my prediction is that this part two movie will open with Fade in the gladiator arena on Yeti Prime with the Baron spectating him. And he's about to get his 1,000th kill, by the way. So, he's not a noob as opposed to Paul as far as kills go, right? The Baron spectating it. And also, this character named Count Fenring, who's an emissary between the Baron and the Emperor, is also attending this 1,000th kill ceremony, if you will. So really interesting scene going on there. You'll get a taste into the politics of the Harkonnens and the Carinos. Great stuff's coming up, and I think you guys will be pretty surprised to see how all of this ends because it's not what you'd expect.
I, I gotta read these books. I definitely, obviously, we had the whole video idea, so I didn't read them. I'm gonna read them very, very soon, and we might actually do like a part two after I've read it, just to talk about what the differences were
Yeah, I
after
mean,
reading it.
there were a
Um,
lot some things that the book actually did better than sorry, the movie did better than the book. For example, like fleshing out characters like Jamis and Raban. That was really interesting because Raban only has one scene in the book, which is that squeeze Raban scene with the Baron, right? But they really gave him a lot
mhm,
more depth. I mean, he's still pretty much a screaming man baby, but it was a lot better than what they gave him in the book. I'll give you that.
yeah, I gotta read these. And would you have any predictions on who's gonna play these newer characters? Like, who's gonna play the Emperor?
Uh I mean, there's some rumors that Mads Mikkelsen might be playing him. Maybe an aged Dev Patel. A lot of people on Reddit are claiming for an aged Dev Patel after seeing how well they aged him in the Green Knight to play the Emperor. I
Hmm.
think Michael Christopher would do an amazing job at playing the Emperor. I mean, he played Philip Price in Mr. Robot, so he'd be a great addition. Not to mention the fact that he kind of looks like who they chose to play the Emperor in the 1984 Dune movie, and it's clear that the casting was in many ways inspired by the casting of that movie. Now, I think Fade,
And in many ways uninspired.
yeah, I mean, yeah, as far as the Baron goes, there's a disconnect, yeah,
Yeah,
and for the better, in my
thank
opinion.
God.
But yeah, as far as Fade goes, I think the obvious choice is Bill Skarsgård, who is the son of Stellan Skarsgård, who's playing the Baron. Now, obviously, you got the whole family tree thing going on, but Fade is a very charming character. I mean, he was played by, take every breath you take, right? Sting. He was played by Sting in the 1984 movie. So
Hmm.
there's a certain level of charm that fans have been accustomed to expect as far as his character goes. And I think Bill could do an awesome job. There's also Princess Irillon, which is the Emperor's daughter. I don't know who's going to play her, but honestly, they have a wide selection of actresses who they could choose who honestly would be perfect for the role.
I'm pretty sure they're gonna go with a very large name, as they've been going for all these, pretty much every single member of this cast.
Yeah, I mean, who do you think would be a good pick for the princess? Just
I don't know honestly, because I gotta read these books before I can. I gotta figure out some personality traits and all that, because they do look for people who have similar personality traits, I assume.
I think, just off the top of my head, I think Chloe Bennett could do a pretty good princess, if you ask me. But I mean, it remains to
Really?
be seen what Denis will pick, and I'm sure he's going to blow our minds with the casting.
Yes, absolutely. Again, I gotta go read these books. All right. That is all we have for this at this very moment on Dune. Dune was an incredible experience, and I recommend every single person to find a theater where it is safe, where you're abiding by COVID restrictions, and safely watch this film in the biggest screen you can find. It was amazing. That's all we got for you. Peace. See you in the next one. Before we end this video, you might be wondering why our logo, our channel art, our link, our title all looks a little bit different. It went from Specto React to Specto Watch, and we're here to tell you why that is.
All right, so Spectre Watch was our second official channel. We're not going to talk about the first one. And by the way, for those of you curious to find enough to find it, good luck. You're never going to find it, and for good reason. But anyway, Specto Watch was our second official channel, but our first Spectral channel where we produced videos that we were proud of. So, it was said that MJ and Quincy Jones mixed Billie Jean 91 times before deciding on going with the second mix. And that's what we're doing here. We're going right back to our roots because we realized that the OG is mostly the best.
And not only that, we don't do much reacting, do we? Like maybe 10 times, maybe we've reacted on this thing total. So I think Spectre Watch is a much more apt name, and this name isn't going anywhere.
Yeah, I should say this name isn't going anywhere unless you guys love Spectre React so much that there's a giant fan outcry and we end up having to Snyder cut you guys and go back to the original name. All right. Hopefully you guys like it and let us know if you guys like it. All right.
Yeah, otherwise, Spectre Watch is here to stay, and we hope to continue the growth and really reach heights with Spectre Watch.
And we hope you'll continue Spectre watching our channel.